Navigating Gatekeepers, cold calling hacks that win. Why gatekeepers make or break cold calling ROI in 2025. B2B cold calling in 2025 is a game of thin margins. When the average dial-to-meeting rate sits around 2.3%, most teams are effectively grinding through 40-plus dials to earn one meeting, and that's before you account for routing, voicemail, and not available loops. In a market like this, you can't afford to waste live conversations, especially the ones that happen before you ever reach the decision maker. Gatekeepers are the leverage point. Receptionists, executive assistants, office managers, and frontline leaders decide whether you get a clean transfer, a better contact, a policy-based shutdown, or a soft try back later that never becomes later. If your team treats gatekeepers like obstacles to bulldoze, you don't just lose one call, you risk getting flagged and quietly losing the account for months. At SalesHive, we coach a simple reframing. The gatekeeper is an unpaid qualification layer, not an adversary. When you approach them like a stakeholder, someone protecting time and reducing risk, you earn better routing, better intel, and more real-time conversations, which is where meetings are actually created. The modern cold calling math and where gatekeepers fit. The benchmarks explain why gatekeeper skill now separates average teams from top performers. Many orgs see cold call to meeting conversion around 2.5%, while the best teams consistently reach 5 to 8% by tightening targeting, timing, and repeatable call frameworks. Gatekeepers sit directly in that path, because even the best opener doesn't matter if you never reach the right person. Connection is also harder than most teams plan for. Some outbound benchmarks report it takes 18-plus dials just to connect with a single prospect, and research commonly cites around 8 attempts to reach them at all. That's why just dial more is a weak strategy. The higher ROI move is making each gatekeeper interaction compound into future access. To make the gap concrete, here's how the same dialing volume plays out when gatekeepers are handled well versus handled poorly. Gatekeeper psychology, what they protect and what they reward. Most gatekeepers aren't trying to block sales. They're protecting a leader's time, minimizing organizational risk, and keeping internal workflows smooth. When you sound pushy, generic, or misdirected, the safest move for them is to end the call or route you into a black hole like send it to info at. This is where a lot of SDR teams sabotage themselves with a single mindset error, treating the gatekeeper like an opponent in a power struggle. That approach might feel bold, but in practice, it gets numbers flagged, burns bridges, and collapses connect rates over time. A better goal is to be easy to pass through by sounding relevant, calm, and respectful of internal process. Practically, we want gatekeepers to do 3 things for us: confirm the correct owner, share the preferred path, transfer, email format, calendar rule, procurement step, and tell us when to call back. When you ask for help protecting their team's time, rather than demanding access, you turn a blocker into a guide. A repeatable call flow that gets you routed, not rejected. Your first 8 to 30 seconds decide the call. Some research suggests 82% of prospects hang up within 30 seconds if they're not interested, and gatekeepers make that decision even faster because filtering is part of their job. So instead of leading with your company and a cheerful script, lead with context in their world, a relevant area, RevOps, IT, finance ops, a trigger, hiring, expansion, tool change, and a simple routing question. We recommend role-based requests when you're not 100% sure of the decision maker. Asking, "Who owns outbound systems for your SDR team?" feels normal and earns collaboration, while "Can you transfer me to Jordan?" often triggers a defensive response if the name isn't recognized or the request feels unsolicited. Once the gatekeeper provides the right person, repeat it back to confirm and ask for the best next step so they can say yes safely. When objections show up, don't debate. Convert objections into process questions. If you hear, "We don't take sales calls," or "Just email info at," acknowledge it, then ask what the usual evaluation path is if it ever becomes a priority, or whose name should be on the note so it lands correctly. This preserves goodwill, gathers intel, and creates a reason to follow up without sounding like you're ignoring what they just said. The fastest way past a gatekeeper is to sound like someone who respects process, protects time, and already belongs in the conversation. Best practices that turn one gatekeeper conversation into many. Timing is an underused advantage in B2B cold calling services. Multiple studies point to late afternoon, especially 4 to 5 p.m., as a high-performing window for booking appointments, and midweek tends to outperform Monday and Friday. Gatekeepers are often less flooded, leaders are transitioning between meetings, and small routing requests get handled faster. Persistence needs structure, not pressure. If it takes around 8 attempts to reach a prospect, giving up after one blocked call is a guaranteed pipeline leak. But repeatedly hammering the same gatekeeper with the same line is how you get shut down. Vary the time of day, keep your language consistent and polite, and reference prior context so the follow-up feels like a continuation, not spam. Most importantly, log gatekeeper intel in your CRM. Names, preferences, best time to reach, internal routing rules, and what you already said should be captured so the next rep doesn't reset the relationship to 0. This is one of the highest ROI process upgrades a sales development agency or internal SDR org can implement because it makes learning compound across the whole team. Common mistakes that get you blocked and how to fix them. The most damaging mistake is treating gatekeepers like obstacles to bulldoze. It often leads to hostile interactions, internal notes, and numbers being routed to voicemail or blocked outright, especially in enterprise accounts where assistants share best practices internally. The fix is simple. Be explicit that you're trying to avoid wasting anyone's time and ask for guidance on the correct process rather than demanding a transfer. The second mistake is running generic, scripted openers with everyone. Gatekeepers hear the same robotic intros all day. The moment you sound like a template, you become easy to filter. Instead, arm your cold calling team with modular talk tracks. One sentence of context, trigger or relevant area, one credibility line, who you typically help, and one question that invites routing rather than resistance. The third mistake is letting junior reps wing it on high-stakes accounts. Larger organizations can have multiple layers of gatekeeping: switchboard, assistant, director, procurement, and improvisation burns bridges fast. A cold calling agency or outsourced sales team should bring call maps, objection frameworks, and role plays so reps can handle gatekeepers consistently without relying on charisma. Advanced optimization, multi-touch plays, polite bypasses, and better conversation rates. If live conversations are roughly 6 times more effective than voicemails for driving meetings, your optimization target is simple: increase real-time connects and reduce dead-end loops. That means designing cadences where calls, email, and social touches support each other, not compete. Many teams pair calling with a cold email agency approach, so the gatekeeper hears a consistent message when they forward or validate your request. The polite bypass can work in limited cases, but it should be used sparingly and ethically. For example, calling a related department to confirm the correct owner, or asking for the best internal routing path often yields the same result as a transfer without creating friction. If you bypass as a habit, you'll eventually run into the same gatekeeper again, and you want that moment to feel respectful, not deceptive. Optimization also means measuring what your team is actually doing. Track outcomes by time window, gatekeeper type, and talk track version. Then coach the deltas. This is where a B2B sales agency mindset helps because it treats calling as a performance system, not an art project. When you document what works, you can scale it across hires, territories, and segments instead of depending on one natural rep. What to do next? Build a system or partner to scale it. The outbound environment isn't getting easier, so the next step is building a repeatable gatekeeper system. Tight targeting, role-based routing questions, time-protecting language, and CRM discipline that preserves context across attempts. When those fundamentals are in place, you'll see your dial-to-meeting performance move away from the 2 to 3% baseline and toward the 5% plus range top teams sustain. If you're scaling fast, the decision is usually whether to hire SDRs and build the machine internally or to lean on sales outsourcing with a specialized outbound sales agency. Internal can work well, but it requires training, QA, data hygiene, and constant coaching, especially for gatekeeper navigation, where inconsistency is punished quickly. Many companies choose an outsourced sales team to compress ramp time and get predictable execution, while their internal org focuses on closing and retention. This is the lane we operate in at SalesHive, a US-based SDR function trained to handle the gritty gatekeeper work with battle-tested playbooks, strong activity standards, and modern tooling. Since 2016, we've booked over 100,000 meetings for 1,500 plus B2B clients by combining cold calling services, list building, and AI-assisted personalization, including our eMod engine, into one system that's built to reach decision makers. If you're evaluating a cold calling agency or sales development agency partner, the bar should be simple. Can they turn gatekeepers into reliable internal guides and produce consistent meetings without burning your brand? Because that's what scales.